from somewhere out in the world, standing in front of a painting that he always does. It's our friend Frank Figliuzzi, a former FBI assistant director. Now you see him at NBC News and MSNBC, author of the book, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence, and the cruise director. I think the cruise is still coming up. Frank, is the cruise? When is the cruise?
Yeah, we're off, Thursday of next week. We're all going on an Alaskan cruise. Thanks for promoting that, by the way. I appreciate it.
Frank, let me ask you a question, my friend. First of all, can you think of an espionage case where a guy was charged with 31 counts of espionage, several counts of obstruction, and counts of conspiracy to conceal documents, and was released on their own recognizance? In fact, even got bail.
Wow, that's a great question. If you add the obstruction in, I would say no.
Okay.
No.
That's all I needed Frank here for. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have.
Well, that's all we have tonight.
Okay.
Hey, we learned today that both the prosecution and the judge agreed that there was no flight risk, so they did not seize Trump's passport.
It's kind of remarkable. It's not like he has his own jet. And people on the news are saying things like, well, Secret Service is not there to hold him hostage. Secret Service is there to take a bullet for the guy. If he goes, hey guys, we're going to Russia today, they don't go, Mr. President, we were not letting you. They go, okay, we're going to Russia.
You're absolutely right. That is not their role. People, I think, just expand the mission of Secret Service way too much. We saw that today in Miami with the security situation. People saying, why can some guy rush the motorcade, and has to be arrested? That's not Secret Service planning the street security there.
Well, that's interesting because a guy dressed in like sort of the prison stripes.
Conveniently in a prison outfit already. So that'll be good. Yeah.
Right. Runs out in front of the car. And you're right, because a typical presidential motorcade, and I live in New York and I've seen many come through because I don't live far from the 59th Street Bridge, and they come from JFK or LaGuardia from Air Force One, generally JFK. But at the same time, while the road is closed, the sidewalks are not. A lot of times you can still be walking. So if you wanted to run out and do something, so let's get back to the bigger thing here. As a former FBI assistant director, when you read the indictment, what jumps out at you?
Oh my goodness. Look, I think it's page 8, but don't quote me on this, where they literally list what I call the victim agencies, meaning the members of the intelligence community, those organizations that were victimized by Trump, meaning they had a document at Mar-a-Lago that's now going to be used as part of the prosecution. And when you look not only across the IC community, the most sensitive organizations we have, some that people are never even familiar with, the National Geospatial Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, the NSA, the CIA. And then look across the chart on page 8 and you'll see the classification markings on those documents, including top secret and code word, including HCS, meaning human confidential source material, meaning somebody will die if that gets out into the open. So look, also, I'm concerned about what's not in the indictment, because just as I said that there are 31 documents listed at the end of the indictment that are going to be used for charges. Each one of those 31 documents constitutes one charge each for willful retention of national defense information. But think about this. 102 classified documents were seized in the search warrant, and only 31 are being used in the prosecution. Why is that? My gut tells me because those other documents were too sensitive for the intel agencies to agree to use them in court.
What an interesting point. So the documents now that are exhibits, and they're marked, they're not exhibits yet. They are described, but very cryptically. Ultimately, before a jury, I assume they'll tell them more. But are you saying there's certain documents that they didn't charge Trump because they had no ability, no approval to potentially expose them to anyone?
Yeah, this is a double shocker for me, right? Because the level of classification documents that were approved, right? Because the prosecution had to go to each one of those agencies and say, are you okay with us using this in some way, shape, or form in court? and they had to agree to that. But imagine, again, 102 documents, right, were seized. So the vast majority were too sensitive in some instances to be used in court. I've had this happen in my career, Dean. I oversaw all espionage investigations when I was the assistant director at FBI. And there have been limited cases where the intel community has come to me and said, no way, no how is this case ever going to see the light of day in court. We simply can't stomach the risk of these documents being exposed.
Remarkable. It's remarkable stuff to learn. And Frank Figliuzzi is the one that makes us smarter because he actually, as the assistant director, was in charge of prosecuting these types of cases. What about, there in the indictment, there are two examples they give of Donald Trump intentionally sharing information that was classified. The most noteworthy is the conversation there's an audio recording of in July 2021 at Bedminster. But he's not charged with that crime. He's not charged with, unless I'm missing something, he's not charged with sharing it. He's only charged with intentionally withholding it. Is that correct?
Well, here's the thing about the Bedminster recording and that document that allegedly was floating around Bedminster. And as an aside, by the way, I'll note I'm still perplexed as to why the FBI has not searched Bedminster, but nonetheless, here we are. Here's the thing. My sources tell me that document, which allegedly refers to attack plans for Iran, if you and I are talking about the same thing.
Yes, we are.
They're not certain where the hell that document is, nor whether, as described by Trump, it literally exists. There's something about General Milley authoring something that might be like that. Yes, indeed. So it's a mess. Also unlikely to be approved to see the inside of a courtroom because of sensitivity. But the value of that audio conversation is not to charge unlawful retention, but rather to disprove Trump's defense that he declassified all these documents. Because as you know, in his own voice, he says to the table, this is classified.
Secret. The term, the military developed this.
I could have, but I didn't. So by his own voice, he's screwing himself in that recording. That's the value of that recording.
But is it correct? I mean, could he have been charged if they wanted to with some kind of disclosing of this information?
If they could find the document and because we've already heard one of Trump's lawyers on television saying, yeah, how do you know that exists? I think he was bragging. He was bluffing. I went
through before you came on, and you may have worked on Reality Winner's case. I don't know when you left the FBI. But Reality Winner was charged with one count of espionage. And the reason they denied bail is that they had intercepted a recording that she had on the phone in prison. Not intercepted, they just recorded, where the suggestion was she had other documents. Turned out to be wrong. She only had one document, the one that she gave to the Intercept, the publication. But because of the fear that she had one other document, that was a big reason the prosecution was able to get a judge to go, okay, no bail for you. In this case, we know documents are missing. I don't, and the concern was she could go out and damage our security even more by leaking it to other media outlets or wherever she's going to give it to.
Yeah, there's not much I can say about that particular case, but I will say she absolutely went to prison, and Donald Trump's looking at far more prison time than that if this prosecution succeeds.
Frank's speaking to us very cryptically, folks, right now. That's all he could say about it. So I'm trying with Frank Figliuzzi. Frank, if Donald Trump is convicted of even one of these charges, and I think it's kind of hard to be just convicted of one count, but just say that were to happen, is there mandatory jail time?
Yeah, there are maximum sentences and there are sentencing guidelines for each and every one of the dozens of charges here. If you calculate it all out, and I caution people not to sit there and go, okay, the maximum on these is 20 years, therefore he'll be in prison for 400 years. That's not how that works. A judge is going to consider everything, but come in within a range or just below the range. And if you take a reasonable approach to the sentencing guidelines and all of the charges, you're looking at 8 to 12 years in prison for Trump, if indeed he's convicted.
Do you think they actually sentence a former president to an actual federal penitentiary, or do you think it's something else they have to do because he's a former president and Secret Service actually has to go? No joke.
Yeah, I think I got to tell you, I think too much is being made. I keep hearing about, oh, you know, Secret Service has to be with him, and yeah, fine. But that's not going to preclude him from going to prison. I don't buy that at all. We have a prison, the federal system has a prison in Florence, Colorado, known as Supermax, right? Robert Hansen, the worst spy in FBI history, was there. The Unabomber. Unabomber was there for most of his sentence till he got sick and went to a medical facility. But the blind sheikh, if you remember him, was there. And so sometimes you're not there in Supermax because you pose a threat to others and a threat of escape, but rather because you're so sensitive that other prisoners would love to take a shot at you. And so that will be Trump. And my guess is he'll end up in Supermax, or you know, some exact opposite, meaning a camp somewhere, a prison camp, which is on the low end. But Secret Service will have some limited presence. But if you really lock the guy down, like Supermax, you really, if you think about it, you just need one agent when he comes out for a shower or an hour of rec time. That's it.
And the reason I was pointing, because Aaron, my associate producer, and others who called said, while they believe Trump could very likely be convicted, that's very possible, of course, they never thought he'd be sentenced to an actual prison, even if he's convicted on numerous felonies.
Well, so, here's where I have another theory, and this is completely conjecture, but based on my experience with mobsters being prosecuted who are of an older age, I predict what we're likely to see if this starts going bad for him at some point. You're going to see the walker, the bathrobe, and the bathroom slippers.
The bathrobe, like the guy here in New York.
Just shuffling into the courtroom. You know, it's going to be a Harvey Weinstein shuffle, and he's going to claim medical condition, and that's what's going to happen. That's where this is going.
He is 77 tomorrow, so
exactly.
Frank, you mentioned early on, but I wanted to get it like in a nutshell. So people understand, because so much is lost about, well, it's willful retention, or was it not or the Hillary emails, that kind of garbage. Can you tell us in a nutshell how sensitive these documents were in terms of the damage they could potentially do to the United States of America, to our military, and to human assets and our service women and men out in the field?
Yeah. So first, let me address the constant annoyance of comparing this case to, say, Pence and the documents in his house, or Biden and the documents that he retained, or Hillary Clinton's server. Nonsense, apples and oranges. Certainly no obstruction, quite the opposite in those cases. Inviting the FBI in the Pence and Biden case, right? Please, God, take these documents. I didn't know they were here. Okay. Yeah. And if I hear one more time that Hillary Clinton physically picked up a hammer and smashed her own devices, my head's gonna explode. So now, sensitivity. We just talked about how highly sensitive the markings are. Top secret is the most you can get in classification. I hear a lot of people saying higher than top secret. There is nothing higher than top secret. There are compartments within top secret that make things read in only, briefed people only, Five Eye nations only, no foreign dissemination only, originator controlled. All of those code names and markings I just described to you are in the indictment as examples, right? Department of Energy, nuclear related materials. Oh my God. So what's the damage? The damage assessment that the way this goes in the intelligence community is, look, the indictment talks about thousands of people traipsing through Mar-a-Lago in 1 year, attending wedding receptions, you name it. Movie premieres are listed in there, and putting stuff on a stage in a ballroom or in the bathroom, is absolutely cringeworthy from a damage assessment standpoint. And I can tell you that Mar-a-Lago, as a second home for the president, like any residence of a president or former president, would be targeted vociferously by foreign intelligence services. And you should assume, and this is what the IC community will do, they assume it's been penetrated. We've heard some glimpses of this in news reporting, Chinese nationals, et cetera, who got in there, attended events. Assume it's gone. Assume if Trump touched it, it's gone. And now what happens in the intel community when you have human source material, technical SIGINT intercepts gone? You have to extract humans from overseas. You have to exfiltrate them. You have to turn off microphones that could be in key places so they don't emit transmissions that are detected. Signals, satellite intelligence, satellites now being compromised as to where they might be over at a certain time in their capabilities. It's really bad.
And I so appreciate you laying that out for people, because people need to understand this isn't one document. These are numerous pages. It's page after page. I mean, there's 31 documents here in the indictment, but there were so many more that were turned over. I mean, don't forget, there was about 190 that he voluntarily turned over in January of last year, 190 distinct documents. Who knows who saw them? Our enemies could have documents missing. We don't know. And that's what you're getting at, that intelligence community has to assume the worst case scenario because people's lives could be at risk.
Yeah. And I think that you made an important point here, which is there were so many documents when you count not just the search warrant retrieval, but all of the negotiated documents that were turned over in bits and pieces, that the special counsel said, you know what? We're just going to use the documents seized in the search warrant because we're not even going to get into the mess of discussing the negotiated documents. We won't even go there. We got enough with just the search warrant.
And also it undermines Trump even more because it shows that Trump wasn't charged for the documents he voluntarily gave back in January 2022, even though he had technically violated the law because he didn't give it back all that time as well, willfully retaining it. But the point was, if he gave everything back, we're not having any of these conversations. There's no arraignment. There's no charge. This was all Trump production. He created by his own hubris and ego and arrogance and whatever else nefarious might be out there. We don't know. I want to rule out that he gave documents to somebody for some benefit for, as people called up, Jared Kushner or himself or the golf tour. I have no idea. All I know is if he turned them all over, nothing happens to him. That's it.
Yeah, forgive me for quoting Bill Barr here, but I do like what he said about this, which is it's a self-inflicted wound. Trump did this himself.
So what do you, and by the way, you mentioned the Hillary Clinton, I was talking earlier in the show, I'm like, as if Hillary Clinton had been charged for her server, all these Trump supporters would be like, well, you know what? The charges against Trump are fair and valid. That's completely okay now.
Right. I've had this discussion with people. So let me see if I get this right. I say, so you believe there was probable cause to charge Hillary Clinton with a federal crime? Yes, I do. Okay, all right. I go, let's go with that. I'm with you. Let's go. So have you read the indictment? Yes, I have. Against Trump? Yes, I have. And do you think there's probable cause in that indictment to charge Trump? No, I don't. Okay. Well, okay. Look, we're done. We're done talking.
There's certain things you can't. I had a guy email me in response to my newsletter about he goes, whenever it tells me, emails you that you don't know and says, I criticize both parties. I'm like, here we go. And he's like, and Trump this, but what about Hillary? And I engaged in one part. And then the next email back was to ignore what I said and said, did you see what happened with the gay people at the White House? I'm like, we're done. Our conversation's over because you're just playing. Let's move the goalpost. Let's talk about anything else because you can't defend your argument. Look, as I keep saying to everyone, it's no longer about convincing Trump supporters. It's about DOJ convincing 12 people in the jury box Trump committed crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. If they can do that, he's convicted. If they don't, he could walk. That's the world. I believe in the system. If he walks, I'll live with it. That's life. This is our system. He's charged, and now it just takes its course.
Well, I will live with it unless Judge Aileen Cannon, pulls what I think she's going to pull, and the special counsel cannot get her recused or get the appellate courts to overturn her. I mean, there is a scenario here, Dean, where this becomes really untenable.
Do you know Doug Jones, the former senator and former U.S. attorney?
Yeah.
And we pre-taped it. It's going to play at 8. And we talked about, we had an hour conversation. I asked him everything. It was like law school again. I went through everything.
Yeah.
He raised such a scary point. He goes, if there's a pretrial motion early on about piercing the attorney-client privilege to let Evan Corcoran testify, he goes, they can appeal that. But he goes, she could just say, I'm not going to rule on it now. Let's get to the trial. In the middle of the trial, when a jury's impaneled, you can't go stop and have a long appeal. It's very unlikely. And she says, nope, it's not going in. And then they're stuck. Yeah. And that's a practical reality. I'm like, wow, how horrible is that? I mean, I hope she recuses herself. I don't know if she's going to.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I hope I'm wrong on this, but she is no dummy. I've heard a lot of people say she's incompetent. She doesn't know the law. Michigan Law School, undergrad, Duke. No, she's not a dummy. She's not, and she knows.
Former federal prosecutor. Former federal prosecutor.
Yeah, exactly. She knows what she's doing. And if she wants to, she can essentially throw a wrench into this case. She could decide that Trump's interpretation of the Presidential Records Act is correct.
Oh my God, they would dismiss charges. I call it judicial idol. She's auditioning for Trump, who in a rare circumstances, a bizarre quirk, is running to be president. And if he won, he could elevate her to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. That's why the inherent conflict is so great to me, because of what she did in the special match. She's got a track record, and the 11th Circuit rebuked her, and now she has the case.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, just from a very practical standpoint, that she decides she just doesn't need this. That she, not ethically, she should ethically recuse herself, yes, for perception purposes, and credibility purposes, but also just practically. She lives way north of Miami. I'm talking 2 to 3 hours, easy. Add some traffic in there. She's going to do that every day to the Miami courthouse. I don't see it. Unless they get her a secure condo and give her security in Miami. I don't know.
Maybe Harlan Crow flies her on his private jet back and forth.
As the
crow flies to groom her, so that when she goes in the Supreme Court and Thomas is no longer around because he's an older gentleman. Very last thing, like 45 seconds. Today, there was more testimony on the January 6th potential crimes. The Nevada GOP chair, Mike McDonald, close Trump ally, testified. They saw him outside of the grand jury. Do you think that the charges in the espionage makes it any more likely that we're going to see January 6th charges as well?
No,
okay.
But I will tie this in. I think that what really emboldened Jack Smith with regard to the January 6th case is the convictions of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys leadership for seditious conspiracy. I think he looked at that, saw DC juries convicting on one of the most highest charges we can ever charge, seditious conspiracy, and he said, I'm in on Trump and the January 6th case.
I hope he's charged. I've been clamoring for that for 2 years and like 5 months, because that's about protecting our democratic republic. I've never clamored for charges on this. Wherever this was going to go, classified documents was going to go. That's it. The other ones protect our republic. Frank, thanks so much. And if people want to follow you, or if there's still tickets for the cruise, where can they go?
Yeah. So any cruise information, last minute, I think there's 1, maybe 2 cabins left. My website, frankfigliuzzi.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, frankfigliuzzi1.
Have a good trip, my friend. Bon voyage. Take care, Frank. Thanks for being on, my friend. I appreciate it.